Good afternoon, everybody. I will call the Board of Police Commissioners special meeting of July 20th to order. In keeping with how we start our meetings, we'd just like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Wherever we are, we're not all in the same place as per usual, but being in the municipality, that certainly still applies. What I'd like to do is just do an audio check for each of the commissioners on the call or on the meeting today. Commissioner McDougall, Carol? Here. Thank you. Carlos?
I am here.
Lisa Blackburn?
Present.
Tony Mancini?
Here from beautiful Dartmouth.
Right. Lindell?
President account.
And Tony Thomas?
I'm here.
Perfect, so we can hear everybody and go through. So the first item on the agenda is community announcements. Are there any community announcements for today's meeting? Not seeing any hands raised or anything, so I'll assume there are none. Thank you. Item number 3 is approval of the minutes for July 9th. So you do have a copy of the minutes from the July 9th special meeting, folks. I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move that we approve the minutes of July 9th. It's Lisa.
Right, moved by Lisa. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it. It's Carol.
Seconded by Carol. Any discussion, comments, updates for the minutes? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Tony Mancini, are you
Aye.
speaking to us? Sorry, I can see your lips moving, but okay, good. Any opposed? No, motion is carried. The minutes are approved. Item number 4 is the approval of the order of business and approval of any additions or deletions. At this point in time, I would like to remove item 10.2.1, the defunding of the police discussion, because that will be dealt with through a separate process. Are there any other additions or deletions
Yes,
from the
Madam
agenda?
Chair.
Yes, Tony?
I would like to have item 10.2.7 moved up after 10.1.1 since they're related.
Yes, no problem. I think we had talked about that at the last meeting, Tony, as well, so
Thank you, Madam Chair.
that's fine. Any other changes, Lindell?
Just, I think for clarification for the item, and I don't know how much, and maybe Marty can help, but for the 10.2.1 discussion, is there just indication of why it should go in camera is what I'm wondering for folks who are watching.
Lindell, that's the funding motion, the funding
Yes.
item. Okay, I'm having trouble pulling up the various things here. Well, normally the normal process where you're talking about a committee, the board's already approved having a committee, so the question about how you constitute that committee is normally considered a personnel matter. That's the way it's handled in council and the way that the board would normally treat those things, okay? Once you have agreement on who the particular members might be, then it's customary to then come out of committee and announce who the members are. But the actual discussion of people is normally handled in camera.
So the one piece that confused me a little bit is we didn't actually, as the board, approve creating the committee. What we did was at the last meeting approved the motion for discussion at this meeting to talk about establishing committee, but we didn't actually approve creating the committee. That's where I get a little confused on us going in camera to
Okay.
have that personnel discussion.
Okay, could we do this then? Could you could we go on with other matters? I want to review the motion and then I'll come back to you. Would that work? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've got various screens here. I'm trying to coordinate them all.
All right.
Okay.
I'm happy with that. Just we're going to review it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So could I have a motion to approve the order of business with the a change in order and the deletion of the one item?
I so move.
Thank you, Tony Thomas.
Yeah.
And a seconder,
I'll second
Alright.
it. Lisa?
seconded by Lisa Blackburn. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No oppositions. Good. The motion is carried. So next item is number 5, which is business arising out of the minutes. There is nothing to report. Number 6, call for declaration of conflict of interest. So, are there any conflict of interest to be declared for today's meeting? Not seeing any. That's great. Number 7 is consideration of deferred business, and there is none. And on to number 8, which is correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Robin, has the clerk's office received any correspondence?
The clerk's office has received correspondence on 10.1.2, 10.2.1, 10.2.3, and 10.2.5. All of this correspondence has been circulated to the board.
Great. Thank you. And no petitions, Robin?
No petitions,
No presentations?
none at the moment.
Great. So maybe just one comment on presentations. There were some logistics around arranging for public presentations at the meeting that have been sorted out. So we did have a presentation that had been deferred, and I know that the clerk's office is working on that at this point in time. So just want to make sure folks were aware of that. Item 9, information items brought forward. There were none. And so we're into section 10, which is reports and discussion, 10.1, staff discussion. And first up is the Wortley report recommendations update from Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray. Yes, Marty.
It's Marty. Before we go into that, could I ask Robin to send me a copy of if she could email me a copy of the motion that was approved at the last meeting? I'm having trouble locating it here.
Absolutely, will do.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So Chief Kinsella.
Well, hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Through you, Madam Chair, I know we are having discussions about how we're going to come up with a new format on the updates. So in the interim, I'll provide an update in our current format, which is verbal. And starting with community engagement, as everyone knows, with the impacts of COVID, some of the in-person community outreach that we have been doing through schools and community offices has been impacted. We are currently working on a redeployment and are monitoring public health guidelines to determine our next steps so we can decide when we can get back to normal activities. In the meantime, the recruitment campaign for our police sciences program that is planned for 2021 launched and is providing us with some new and interesting ways to do community outreach with a number of our diverse communities. We have also held a couple of virtual roundtables with organizations representing diverse communities, including YWCA, ISANS, and other partners. And we are also talking about other virtual and social media opportunities to spread our message for this most important training program that we're hoping that COVID will allow us to run in 2021. And the campaign is very much focused on encouraging underrepresented groups to come forward and consider a career in policing. So we're hoping to tap out to all those groups, and we are working actively with HRMHR and diversity and inclusion branches. Through the Chiefs Advisory Committee, we have been having a lot of outreach initiatives, and we are working on a number of things with the community, and we will continue to update on those as we go along. Most notably, we are working on a training program currently in development that will see better understanding of the African Nova Scotian community. And we have met twice, once in person and once virtually. So things continue down that road, and relationships are continually to be forged and built upon. As far as data collection goes, our data is set to be purged in December 2020. As the board is aware, not even consultation, under the direction of board and in accordance with Wortley's recommendations. We have been reaching out to the community for some time now to ensure that they are aware of that date, and that if they are looking for any information on individual street check data information that may be out there, they can apply through the FOIPOP process. It is a free process, and to date we have received one individual request related to this. As far as the street check ban goes, we have met with the Department of Justice and the Rcmp recently, also with the chair through you. You were at one of the recent meetings as well. We have reviewed the Wortley recommendations which apply to the banned environment. Chief Superintendent Gray and I also met with the chair, and we've had just recent correspondence with DOJ. So a number of the recommendations have been dealt with and reported on in this venue. There are others that are going to require a collective effort, and we have been at the table not only between the Rcmp and HRP, but also at the board level and the Department of Justice level. And as far as the extension for data access, HRP is set to identify or de-identify our street check data, as I mentioned, in 2020. And that, of course, is of previous direction of the board and in accordance with Wortley recommendations. And subject to any questions, Madam Chair, that's my report.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll go over to Chief Superintendent Gray first, and then we'll go see if there are any questions for either Chief Gray or Chief Kinsella.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So in regards to the Wortley report and community, since our last update and consistent with Chief Kinsella, the pandemic has had a significant impact on our overt or in-person community engagement. Doesn't mean we're not seeking opportunities, obviously, to support our communities, especially those racialized communities. We do have a 14-member full-time community policing and school liaison officer team in our district. Even during COVID, they continued with their roles and responsibilities, however, in supporting the watches in uniform. It also doesn't mean that our general duty members aren't also participating in community events. Note, the Rcmp has recently updated our bias-free policing policy, which means obviously we're striving to provide equitable treatment for all people by the Rcmp employees in the performance of their duties. We're continually working towards building a workplace that respects all people, values diversity, and fosters inclusion. And by recently updating the policy, it's in draft. However, it shouldn't take long before it becomes national. Within training, our next ACE course has been scheduled for the end of October, certainly providing opportunity for yourself, Madam Chair, as well as others on the board, as well as HRP members to participate, and those numbers will come out shortly. In the last fiscal year, we trained 84 Rcmp officers for HRP, as well as members of the Department of Justice. Depot is up and running again, which is good news for everybody. We've had a troop that just recently graduated last week. The cadet training program, obviously the concept of cultural awareness, this was one of the questions that was brought up before. It's interwoven within the concepts that are taught on human rights, harassment, discrimination, ethics, and bias-free policing. Of note, I'd say within the last 2 weeks, we have a draft strategy that's come out of our national headquarters under our Vision 150 concept. I know we brought that up before. Titled Advancing Equity, Accountability, and Trust. There are significant programs and processes that are embedded in that new strategy. I'll be able to provide a further, I'll say confirmed outline of that by the next meeting, but within there's expanding our recruitment to permanent residents, increasing diversity of proactive recruiters, as well as introducing a bias-free recruitment process, as opposed to waiting for the cadets to get to depot. So that's interesting for us. Continuing with community, this year's annual performance plan continues to include, as in past years, enhancing our connection with our Indigenous and Mi'kmaq communities, as well as that with our African Nova Scotian communities. So those are two priorities for the Nova Scotia RCMP. Regards to data collection, Madam Chair, it's we have already put out our communication strategy publicly on our socials, as well as internally on our website, that articulates the purging date for RCMP data, which is April 2021. Within that is the instruction for the general public to gain access to their personal information through ATIP, which of course is free, as we've stated before. Pending any other questions, Madam Chair, that's all I have on those three topics.
Great. Thank you to both chiefs for the update. Questions, Commissioner McDougall, Carol? Carol?
To unmute myself. I'm wondering, this is a
Hi,
question.
Carol. Sorry to interrupt. I believe your camera has been reversed.
Oh, really? Not again. There you go. This is a question for Chief Kinsella. When you refer to the committee the Chief's Advisory Committee, you meant the committee that was recommended in the Wortley report, not the Diversity Advisory Committee, right? Am I?
No, through you, Chair. I meant the committee that was formed as a result of my commitment to follow up steps from the apology in November.
Okay. So have we ever seen a list of names on that committee? And I'm not asking for it to be read out publicly, but I'm just interested in knowing who the people are. That would be my first question. The other is about the Diversity Advisory Committee. And I know it's challenging to be meeting at this time, but is there any scheduled opportunity, because it's broader than the whole street check issue, which Wortley dealt with. Is there any plan for that group to restart meetings or come together? Just wondering about that.
So through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, the names can be provided to the board, certainly, on the first piece, and that's the Chiefs Advisory Committee. The second piece, the Diversity Advisory Committee that arises out of Wortley. My understanding is that the DOJ is coordinating that committee. They previously had some coordination, they had some meetings. The committee was either stood down or taking a break, and I don't have all the details. And my understanding is that the DOJ is actively working on bringing that forward again.
Actually, I was referring to the Diversity Advisory Committee that's chaired by Deb Eisen. I think Carlos sits on that, and a number of other community members, youth, etc. So that was the group I was actually asking about, and when would they start up again?
Yeah, so, okay, thanks for the clarification, and through you, Chair. The PDWG, or Police Diversity Working Group, co-chaired by myself and Chief Superintendent Gray, last met just before the COVID breakout, and we recently have had correspondence with the committee, and we are actively setting up a new meeting date that I expect to take place very soon. And I know that Chief Superintendent Gray has been working on this as well as I have. So we hope to meet again very soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Carlos, did you have any questions at this point?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is for both of the chiefs, and I'm interested in wondering whether or not the current training that you've both mentioned, inclusive of the new cohort training that's expected to come in 2021, I'm wondering if you have any training on awareness in transcending fear as part of that training. I do have more questions on how this training and the screening, but I'm just more interested in knowing whether or not this is something that we address, whether or not awareness and transcending fear is part of that training.
Madam Chair, I just I'm a little confused by the question, or maybe just the councillor's question in regards to awareness. It's just difficult to hear him.
Yep. Can you hear me better now?
That's a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So my question is, does any components of training focus on awareness? So when I look at awareness, I look at just being fully aware of your being and all the different things that might arise, such as thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Do we have anything that addresses awareness along with transcending fear? Is that part of the training? How I'm trying to figure out how are we capturing and training new recruits in terms of how do they transcend fear?
Okay, I understand your question now. I think that certainly, Commissioner, it's something that the training for intervention, de-escalation, mental wellness, mental awareness is a very fulsome aspect of training. It's not just one element. Certainly further, we've been discussing in the past as well, talking about our intervention model with the board. And I think through you, Chair, if that would be an appropriate venue to speak to how our cadets are trained and tested and conditioned in regards to intervention, de-escalation, and I'll say using Commissioner's term, awareness.
Chief Kinsella?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, to the Commissioner. Well, I haven't ever heard of it referred to as transcending fear training. I would say that there are aspects of that recognition of oneself, one's recognition of one's perspective as the officer involved in situations, how they deal with de-escalation, how they communicate both, verbally, non-verbally, and tactically. All those things are consideration. And much like Chief Superintendent Gray just mentioned, many of the training components are put together so officers are continually assessing their role, their position in whatever scenario is playing out in whatever environment they find themselves in. And then obviously further considerations in regards to, what's the physical environment, what's the lighting, what are all those other things that they have to consider. That also plays into their perception of what they're dealing with versus what they're actually dealing with versus their ability to deploy the training and negotiate or tactically talk their way out of situations, and always with an eye to de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. So that's my comments on that.
Carlos, just as a reminder, we do have an overview of training both for the RCMP and HRP cadets captured as an agenda item for a future meeting.
Yep, understood. I do have more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
However, I will hold off on asking at this moment and allow the other commissioners to weigh in.
Thank you, Carlos. Lisa Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. I guess the first one is how has COVID impacted our ability to move forward on many of the Wortley report recommendations? I guess I'm just looking for an indication as to how far behind our intended timeline this has put us. And my second question is the two different dates for purging the data, and I'm just wondering if that is going to be problematic moving forward, where we've got one police force, doing it in 2020 and the other not until 2021. I'm just wondering if that leaves us vulnerable in any way. Thank you.
If I can, Madam Chair, if I can speak to the date question. I don't think it's going to be a challenge for a chief or I in regards to managing that. It's very clear through our socials, persons that are asking for information from one or the other. So I think we'll be able to manage that fairly well. In regards to the impact when it comes to COVID on our Wortley recommendations, I think we've always acknowledged that it's a live, it's a live document. The recommendations, many will be continuing on and will never be, I'll say, completed. I think some of the challenges that we've seen is the same as everybody in regards to just getting together physically, but as Chief Kinsella spoke before, we're up and running again in regards to our virtual meetings and certainly reaching out through our community members and taking opportunities now. Sometimes meeting virtually is actually easier. So we're finding that as well. So that's all I have pending. Any questions, Madam Chair?
Chief Kinsella, did you want to add anything?
Sure, thank you, Chair, and through you to the Commissioner. So much the same, the dates come out of Wortley, the dates come from the Board of Police Commissioners. The physical back end piece of getting, de-identifying the data can be done. So there's no real challenges there. And as far as COVID goes, COVID has impacted all of our abilities, as you know, and it has taken some time to, kind of get through it. One of the things that we've been cognizant of and we're paying attention to, and hasn't gone away for our frontline responders, that COVID is still out there. COVID is still a very real thing. So we have to manage that through the effective use of PPE and those kind of things. As far as the comments on virtual meetings, they are happening much better, and I would agree. In some cases, they are a little bit easier to carry out. I also would say that, face-to-face interaction is also quite helpful to ensure proper messaging and getting together and having those conversations. So we're working through it. We are cognizant of a second wave potentially, and we have those kind of plans in place, working very closely with HRM and return to work and paying attention to all of those things. So we continue to work through it, and we continue to move the work forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Tony Mancini? You're muted, Tony. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Tony.
Commissioner Mancini, you may have to unplug your headphones.
Oh, we've got some very wicked feedback there. Try again, Tony.
And testing.
There we go.
My apologies, folks. This question is for Chief Superintendent Gray. Chief Superintendent, when it comes to the Wortley report, we had asked before what's the RCMP's intention with regard to an apology similar to HRP did in November. I know that's beyond your decision making, and that was to go to Ottawa. Have you heard any more on that, where that stands? Have you been updated? Is there a conversation taking place, or do we anticipate no response at all on that topic?
Thank you, Commissioner, through you, Chair. Certainly, there will be a response. It's not there will be follow-up. What it was stated previously was that the CRCC is conducting their national review of street checks for the RCMP, and including a number of different criteria. And of course, the Commissioner is waiting for that. Previously, we were told March 2020, obviously, for the review to be done. Received an update actually last week in regards to that being moved forward, mostly because the stage of interviewing had to be postponed. We have members within our police and community here that are still waiting for their interview. So as such, it's been put forward until, all I've been told is the fall of 2020. I've asked for something a little bit more specific. However, at this time, it's been put forward though several months. I will keep everybody updated.
Thank you, Chief Superintendent, and I again apologize to directing the question to you, but you're the only one in front of me. I realize it's not coming from you, but knowing fall, so I'll ask the question in the fall. We haven't heard again, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Lindell?
Oh. Hello, I might be sharing my screen by mistake. Am I sharing my screen? Okay. You hear me? Check 1, 2. I can't hear anybody.
We can hear you.
Okay, all right. No one gave me indications. So really quickly, a couple quick questions. And Chief Superintendent Gray, actually, this might be a twofold question because you provided information that I actually was going to ask our chief, HRP, Dan. So what I was wondering is, and we're getting a presentation on training for recruits and whatnot in the future, so I'll ask some more pointed questions, but has there ever been, and I'm not sure if you will have the information on this, Dan, but has there ever been a full review from the commission, and even if it's not the commission, but has there ever been a review either outside or internally of our recruitment process, especially now since we're doing it in-house with our school?
And through you, Chair, just to get clarification, Commissioners, that you're asking if there's ever been a review of the RCMP recruiting process?
No, HRP, but then I have a question because you brought something up that I was going to ask.
I beg your pardon, I jumped out.
No, it's okay, thank you. So this would be for HRP.
So through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, all of recruiting that happens in Nova Scotia is done through the Nova Scotia Police Recruiting and Professional Standards Guidelines. So right from the DOJ. As a service, and after our last Police Sciences program, which graduated in November, we take the opportunity to review the training, review the outcomes, make any tweaks that we can for future training, which we have done for the upcoming 2021 training. Obviously, we also put it through the lens of Wortley. And one of the things that we have done for the upcoming Police Sciences program is introduced bias and racism training on the upfront. There is some very professional tools out there now, and that will become another component. And that's addition to, all the other cognitive and psychological training that would have went on for recruits heading into the previous class. And we are currently also looking at, how do we maintain that training and reassessment over time? Because we know that, when officers are hired, they come in with certain, outputs and experience and all those kind of things. And then as time goes on, there is development and changes that occur, and how do we track that? So those are the only two that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of a full-scale commission review. But obviously, that's something that could be explored if that's the will of the BOPC.
So when we have that discussion in the future, depending on the information that's presented, it might be something for us to have a lens of community impacts. Because obviously, we can't tell you how to respond to a certain incident as a commission. But I think what will be important for us is, part of what our role is to also give our opinions on how policies and how policing in HRP affects community. So when we had that discussion, that's something that I hope we can dig a little deeper in. And the other question that's related to the Rcmp, the bias-free policing, from my understanding, and we've talked about this in the past, is there a connection with that program and HRP's program? Like, have you shared that work, or has HRP created their own? Because from the feedback that I've received from folks who are in the Rcmp, they do say that is a great program, and I hope that there was some collaboration when we started to do that.
So I can jump in here, Chair, if it's okay, through to the Commissioner. Chief Superintendent Gray and I have discussed the content of their ACE course on a number of occasions. The Rcmp has been gracious enough to allow our members to attend the course, and we have put a number through to date. We continue to recognize the importance of that course and the effect, and we are actively looking at something similar, maybe with a little more Nova Scotia, related foundation. One of the things, and I don't want to speak for Chief Superintendent Gray, but you usually can only put 24 people through a course at a time. I think there's great benefit to be able to accelerate that course, and if we have the opportunity to get ours up and running, which we're actively working on, under the same, type of course because of the impact it's had. We'll certainly like to do that. The main goal from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for the RCMP, is to put as many people through it as we can. We are obviously, guided by numbers and how many officers we can take off the street at a time and all that. But certainly that is the direction we're headed. And just on your comment about community input, I have been soliciting community input for a year now, and they have been loud and clear and are actually advocating and providing valued input on what they would like to see, specifically as it relates to this type of training. So we are in dialogue with community members all the time, and we will continue to do that while we try to put the course syllabus together, as well as when the opportunity is there, take advantage of any seats that the RCMP are able to supply to us.
Great. So my last question is related to the street tech data access. Am I incorrect? Did you say that timeline has been extended?
Through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, we're set to de-identify ours in December 2020 in accordance with the direction of the board and in accordance with Wortley, and that's where it sits currently. The RCMP have already spoken on their timelines due to federal requirements, so that's where it sits. We have been actively reaching out to the community to let them know if they're looking for any information, the process on how they can access that. And then the de-identified data would be kept in perpetuity according to Wortley, and again in accordance with direction from the board.
So I'm wondering if we need a motion, or if I put for motion now for us to extend that timeline for two reasons. One is obviously COVID related, and the other is, for the last number of months when we've had this discussion, it's always been one person has accessed it. And for me, I won't say I'm all over the community, but the folks that I've spoken to in the community and the places I've been, I really never saw or heard the work being done to get the grassroots and get the folks who would probably most be impacted by that, for them to go and get their data, to access their data. So, from day one, I had some concerns, and maybe I need to play a more of a role to help out. But I had concerns with how we were going to reach people to access it. And, if we only have one, but if you go back and look at the folks who have written into us, who've had concerns, who have spoken up, there's a lot more people who would want access to the data. So I don't know if us going on the same trail that we've approved, which I understand, but, given COVID and given the fact that one person has access, I feel that we might need to look at how we're doing it. So I'm wondering if I need to put a motion forward, or if that's just something that we can just have a discussion on and looking at extending that timeline to meet that.
I would recommend that we have some further discussion on that, and whether it leads to a motion or not. I think let's capture that as business arising from the minute or from the meeting today, to have a discussion perhaps at the next meeting on that. Just that I would hate us to make a decision and put a motion forward without, going back and looking at what's in Wortley and doing our due diligence around that. But I totally understand where you're coming from, Lindo.
All right, if that could be added to the agenda for next meeting, I'm good to go.
Great.
Thank you.
So Tony Thomas, any questions?
Yeah, I just had, just wanted to say first, I want to thank Chief Kinsella and Chief Lieutenant Gay for their comments on the importance of diversity within our police forces. So my question is for Dan, Chief Kinsella. Could you let me know how the recruitment going, or how your department is reaching out to our Indigenous communities, both urban and rural, and how do you see the process going so far? And do you see any challenges, or you foresee any challenges? And to your knowledge, or just your opinion right now, how has that recruitment in our communities been going so far? Has it been well received? Has there been any negativity at all, or has it been all positive? And what are your plans for the future when it comes to recruitment in our communities?
Thank you, Commissioner, and through you, Chair. We have been actively reaching out to all of our diverse communities, and in particular through the Aboriginal Committee, through Debbie Isons and her contacts and connections, and also through the Diversity and Inclusion branch with HRM and all of their connections, and also internal ones in regards to some officers that identify as Indigenous. So we will continue to do that. We know it's very important. Your question around urban versus rural, very important. Urban is a little easier to get to, as I'm sure you know, so we're putting strategies together to get out into the rural communities. And we've taken the approach that this is Nova Scotia wide, and even beyond, actually. People can apply from outside of the province. So we're focusing on all of the smaller communities, certainly not restricted just to HRM, but trying to broaden our base to all of Nova Scotia. And if candidates can work within the COVID rules, they can also apply from outside of the province. So we recognize there's work to be done, and we're actively reaching out to and working with all of our connections in the community to ensure and do our very best to make sure that we're connecting and getting the message out.
Thank you for your comments, Chief. Thank you.
If there are any other questions, I'll just have a look in the chat. If folks did have another question, you can put it in the chat. We have a couple minutes just in case. No, seeing none in the chat, that's great. Thank you for the update to both chiefs on that item. So next up, I'm not sure what the number will be, but it will be Tony Mancini's motion. I'm just trying to find it here. Scrolling down, which was originally 10.2.7. And the motion was that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request that Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray provide a written update that details the status of the Wortley Report recommendations, including plan, action steps, and progress at each meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners, and provide a detailed quarterly update to Halifax Regional Council. Over to you, Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I apologize to everyone. Of all days have renovations going on in my house is today. So you hear the odd banging and drilling. My apologies for that. So should I put the motion on the floor first before conversation?
Marty?
Yep. I'm getting a nod from Marty, so I'll do that, Marty. So I'll put the following motion on the floor, then we can discuss it. That the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request that Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray provide a written update that details the status of the Wortley Report recommendations, including plan, action steps, and progress of each meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners, and providing a detailed quarterly update to the Halifax Regional Council. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. So maybe if I can just try to clarify, when I read back that motion, it may be a little bit confusing, and I can make it a little simpler. I'm not looking for a very labor-intense update. The updates we just received are very good. The challenge with that is the average resident or citizen is looking for an update. They have no way of getting that update. And in fact, even at one point in time, the mayor reached out to me wanting to get an update because he was going to have an interview, and we couldn't give him an update. And we didn't, because everything was verbal as we received today. All I'm looking for is something very simple that would be sitting on the HRP website, sitting on the HRM website, or our staff would have access, and simply a checklist of all the 20-some action items from the Wortley Report. You'd have a column that item number 1 is completed. Great, check mark. That's it. Item number 2 is in progress. Item number 3 yet to be started. And a disclaimer of the last time this checklist was updated. Because the last thing I want someone to think that they looked at it this week and they look at it in 2 weeks' time, there's no change, that we're not doing anything. So I'm just trying to make it really simple, have it in public so we know where we are with all the action items, and that it's easy for the public to see our status.
Okay, Carol, comments or questions?
My only comment is I thought something like this was underway, had been drafted as with all of the different recommendations and items, sort of the status of each item. So perhaps this has happened already and it just hasn't been public yet. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, there are a number of documents that are at play right now. I think that's probably the challenge in that the Department of Justice is maintaining a document. Both chiefs, are maintaining their own detailed documents around the specific steps that have been taken. And those are very complex, certainly, and detailed. And that work is ongoing. And I think, Tony referenced his conversation with the mayor, and I had a conversation with the mayor at that time as well. And I also have a document, that we were willing to share at that point in time for him too. So you are right, Carol, that work is ongoing and such a document does exist. There certainly would be some consideration to the size and format of it, in making it public and just making sure that there's no confidential information included in it, but such a document does exist, and that's been based on the monthly conversations that I have with both chiefs that result in the updates that do come to the meetings. Any other questions?
Thank you. So thank you. Is it possible for your document, which I understand from what you've just said, doesn't have all the detail and complexity that the chief and chief superintendent are maintaining? Is it possible that yours could be shared publicly and updated, and just to keep on our website to show progress, or at least status?
I think that document would be the most likely one out of the 4 in existence that would be suitable for that, but some work would still need to be done. Any other questions, Carol? You're muted. Okay, that's a no. I can read lips. Carlos, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure how I asked this question, but I do agree with what Tony is requesting. I think that we do need to be on top of it and have information available at each meeting, and especially available to the public so that they can look over it and review, and so that they know exactly what we're discussing and where we're heading. My question is more so, now I don't know how this even works, but like, is it possible that there be some form of a business plan on this report, which details the action steps and the progress that is being made, and possibly even a budget? I just don't know how we move forward, not sort of just almost is like we're just picking up pieces as we go. I would like to see some form of a formalized business plan in terms of how we are tackling the Wortley report and what resources have to be allotted to ensure that we arise to the moment.
That certainly would require a lot more work to add to that. Certainly from a budget perspective, I think it's fair to say that there really isn't a specific budget that's allocated to that. I will remind folks at the budget presentation that we went forward with a number of recommendations under the police budget that tied directly to the Wortley recommendations that were not approved by council at that point in time. So I think that question's an easy one, but in terms of additional detail, might I suggest that, if we go forward with this, that, let's sort of do it in a stepwise process. We, bring forward the document and then really have discussions about, whether it fits the need or not. I know Tony has included sort of an example of a possible format for this, but I think it may be sort of, once it's in a form that's ready for consumption, that would be part of the discussion at that point in time about what additional information would be added.
Yeah, I would agree. I always say, you have to follow the resource or follow the money. And I think that what we need to have is we need to ensure that we are meeting the moment and that we have a well thought out plan that is going to move the needle. So I do welcome more discussions on this.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. Any other questions? No? Okay, Lisa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just be brief. I support what Tony's trying to do with this, and I think if I understand him correctly, we're not looking for, you know, an in-depth 5-page report at every meeting. Just a 1-page, even if it's just an infographic that just here are the action items from the Wortley report. You know, finished, in flight, not started yet, and that's it. It's just sort of the information is there at a glance, and then, you know, I think the more fulsome breakdown of where we're at comes in, I think, what is it, a yearly report or update that we get from staff. So I support Tony's motion here. Thank you.
Lindell?
My support as well. My question also, and I don't know if we want to bring Jacques in now, was around the comment that Jacques made in the chat, but I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him speak on that when the time comes. And I guess my only other question would be in terms of putting that information together in one place. As you mentioned, Chair, there are some different avenues of where that information goes. How does that happen on behind the scenes? Because we have the Department of Justice, we have obviously us, HRP and Rcmp. I'm just wondering the logistics of getting that, and on, you know, if every meeting is one thing, but, you know, trying to get that, well, I'm sorry, getting quarterly is one thing, but getting it every meeting, coordinating all those bodies, I'm just wondering how the logistics of that would work as well.
That's happening now. I'm meeting with both chiefs on a monthly basis on a number of issues, and the Wortley recommendations and the progress updates do form part of that. Be very frank in that the Department of Justice would be more of a challenge, and that the frequency of meetings with them and sort of the communication is probably not at that same level. So we would certainly be able to provide a fulsome update from both chiefs as part of that document, but any updates from DOJ or the other partners that are mentioned in there, such as the Human Rights Commission, would really be as we would receive the information from them.
Okay, thanks. And I'm wondering if we want to talk about the other item that was brought up by Jacques.
Yeah, I was going to do that when I got to my turn, but certainly let's bring it up now. So Jacques' comment in the chat, Jacques, I'll let you speak. I won't speak for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a question really for Marty's consideration. You know, the board is asking that, in the motion is asked, if adopted, would be suggesting that a written report be provided to council. So the board can't direct reports to council, to my knowledge. The board can ask for reports for its own purposes, and council should ask for its own reports, I think, is the way it normally works. But Marty, I think if the board wants to share a report with council, it can certainly do that. But to direct the chiefs to prepare a report to council, it's not something that's allowed under the charter. Only I can produce reports for council, and council itself can only direct reports to come to it. So it's just really a protocol procedure issue. I'm asking.
Yeah. The way I was reading the motion was basically that, you know, that basically the report would be to the board and then it would be shared with council. It wouldn't be a report produced for council. You're absolutely correct on that. But you have to look at the word again. If Tony, look again at your exact wording there.
Yeah, I think it just means a tweak to the wording. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. So while you're looking at that, Marty,
when I read and provided a detailed quarterly report, I read that as providing a copy of it, but I think the motion should be clarified on that basis.
Thank you. Tony Thomas?
I got no questions at the time, Madam Chair.
Right. So I just had a couple of comments. So folks do have other questions that they want to come back to. I'd ask them to use the chat. I think just along with Jacques' comment, I did have the same concern as well with us dictating to council what they want and when they want it. So I think that direction should come to us through council, because I think the broader discussion really for us from a council perspective is, you know, council needs updates from the Board of Police Commissioners, full stop, not just on the Wortley recommendations and the work that is doing and the work that we are doing. So, you know, the second half of that with us providing that information to council and the frequency, I guess I would feel that that's direction that we should ask council for. You know, how do they want to hear from the board? That it would be part of this motion, that would be a separate discussion that we have with council. Because I think we need to look broader, particularly as we've discussed where, you know, the previous chair was a councillor. So there's a certain level of communication that's happening. Because of that, I'm not a councillor. I think we need to really understand how do they see that relationship and that communication on all of our work, not just limited to Wortley, but the other important things that are going on. And I'm just going to pop into the chat. Carol has a comment and Tony's asked to close, so I'll go to Carol first.
So when we're talking about reporting to council, I have no comment about us making a recommendation that we report to council, but council outlined the board's roles and responsibilities. I think it's about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years. And one of the things in that document said we had to do an annual report, and it was usually done around this time of year for July, August meeting. And I think through COVID, some of those things obviously, you know, it just naturally kind of end up on the back burner. What's the priority, that kind of thing. So maybe there's a way to include this document with the annual report that we do, or some update as part of that. Just a thought to pass on.
Yeah, that would be included as part of the annual update because it's a significant piece of work that we do. But certainly the level of detail that's in that update may be very different than what their expectation is. And I don't know that, but I think it's worth, you know, from my perspective, you know, council should be telling us what they want to see. You know, they're aware of the Wortley recommendations, they're aware of the work that's going on, certainly the current climate and all the, you know, the activity that's happening as a result of recent events. So I'm just not altogether comfortable with necessarily telling them that we're going to give this to them and this is when we're going to give it to them. We need to know what will meet their needs and what are they looking for.
You're muted, Natalie. We didn't hear where you said.
Sorry, I was looking in the chat there. There weren't any other questions or comments. So Tony, you had asked to close on this, so I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, you mentioned that you're not a councillor, but you have up until end of August. So to put in your papers, we would welcome another strong female on board to go along with the deputy mayor. So, feel free and we'll work on that piece. Great comments, great conversation. Again, I'm not looking to create a lot of work here. I'm really looking, as the deputy mayor stated, a very simple checklist of where we are. That's all that I'm looking for. And Marty, you're right. I mean, a change of the in the wording of the motion to copy council on that checklist would be fine by me, and I consider that friendly. However, you know, requesting a report, you know, this is such an important document and action from the both of our police departments. To make it simple, when I get in council, I can easily just create a motion that says that we request that we get a report from the both chiefs on the Wortley report, and maybe it's the checklist with a little more meat to it. So not to worry today on that piece, so I can bring that back from a council perspective. So I'm just asking that people support this, so end result, we end up with this checklist and it's posted on the website so our citizens know exactly where we are. So I thank you for the conversation.
With Tony, just to be clear, where does that leave your motion then? Are you deleting the last portion with respect to council and leave that to council as Natalie's suggesting, or are you suggesting just changing it to copying council?
So why don't I, to make it easy, Marty, why don't we just remove it from the last line and provide a detailed quarterly update to Halifax Regional Council? I'll remove that from the motion, and then in council, I'll submit a different kind of a motion that's requesting a report. Yeah, I'm very easy to get along with, regardless of what some people think. So thank you very much.
So just for the folks doing the minutes, Tony, can I just get you to read the revised motion, if you don't mind, just from beginning to end?
Certainly. Let me. Okay, let me try this on the fly, Madam Chair. The Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request that Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray provide a written update and details the status of the quarterly report recommendations, including plan, action steps, and progress at each meeting of the Board of Police Commission, and a copy of that is sent to Regional Council. Does that work, Marty? I think you're still muted, Marty.
You know, I'm here. I thought you were just going to remove the reference to Regional Council in total, and then we're just going to move that to Regional Council.
So you don't want the copy part. That's fine. And again, just to end it, once again, that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray provide a written update that details the status of the work report. Recommendations include plan, action steps, and progress at each meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. Period. And I do ask, sorry, if I do ask Marty, I would like to see that checklist, whatever form it takes, to be sitting on the website so it's available to residents.
So we have the motion by Tony Mancini. Is there a seconder?
I will second that, Lisa.
Seconded by Lisa Blackburn. Any additional discussion? Just looking in the chat here. Oh, that's Simon just typing up the memo. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Lindell is opposed. Any abstentions?
No,
oh, sorry, Lindell. Oh, you're just delayed.
I was late.
No dissension. Any abstainers? No, the motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Okay, so now I'm just going to backtrack on the agenda. So next up on the agenda would be the community survey update. Chief Kinsella and Chief Superintendent Gray. I'll start with who wants to go first.
I can go if that's, or you can go, Janice, whatever. Do you want me to go,
fine.
Chair?
You go ahead, Dan.
Okay, through you, Chair, for the commissioners. So the RFP, as you know, we've been working on it. We've met as a group, Chief Superintendent Gray and the Chair, and we have passed the deadline for proposals. We have currently a number of individuals and companies that are interested. One of the things that we have to consider is, given the current budgetary constraints, we'll need to have a discussion about, the budget that's available, as well if it's how the cost sharing agreement goes between the board, the Rcmp, and HRP. We've had some preliminary discussions, and the committee now currently is providing evaluation and feedback, and there's membership from both Rcmp, HRP, and Board of Police Commissioners. So we look forward to how that comes through, and then it'll be forwarded to procurement for further considerations. And there are a couple of options. I'll throw it out there, and I'm sure Chief Superintendent Gray will have some backup information to supply. An option always, I believe, is using HRM's corporate planning survey. That takes place, and could we do some enhanced surveying around that, as that might fit into policing and HRM. And then the other piece, as I understand, and then I'll turn it over to the Chief Superintendent, is that the RCMP has a national surveying ability that also is on the table for some discussion. So that's what I have from our end.
And through you, Madam Chair, further to that, thank you, Chief, yes, that it is an option in regards to the survey center, which is out of national headquarters. So that is definitely being followed up in regards to using that system or, or adding it on to another survey. But these are just in preliminary discussions, but hopefully we will have a better understanding of what that would look like in a response for your next meeting.
Questions for either of the chiefs? Carol, on the survey? No. Carlos?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Lisa? Thank you. Lisa? Okay. Tony Mancini?
Yes, Madam Chair. I wonder if we could, we've talked about different types of surveys, and I'll admit that I'm a little confused on this particular survey. So what's the intent of this survey again, and the functionality, how it's going to work? If you could just give me a very brief overview of that again.
Dan, I'll defer that one to you.
So thank you, Chair. Through you to the Commissioner. The survey issue, as I understand, has been discussed since 2014, long before my arrival. And the purpose of it is to get a baseline on where we are currently. Timing-wise, there's lots of factors that would affect the outcome of that. We recently had a survey in 2018 prior to my arrival that, we took the input and the feedback from that and try to work through some changes. So my view is this is really about ensuring that we find out what our community is feeling, how they're feeling, how they see policing, and then getting together to try to address those concerns and or issues. What are we doing well? What can we change? And looking at all of that. The challenge is, much to Commissioner Thomas's point earlier, is reaching out beyond, our urban communities into the rural areas. And how do we do that? Chief Superintendent Gray and I have had some discussion on that point with the chair. And we actually had a presentation, you recall, back a little while ago from Narrative Research. And as a result of that, we just need to be careful to ensure that we allow everyone to participate in the survey and that their voices are heard. So, it's easy to say that we want to go with a internet survey only, but not everyone has access. So we have to do mail out, we have to do phone, all of those things. So lots of discussion to be had on it, and I think it would be important if we can come together as the stakeholders, and I see them ourselves, RCMP, and you as the board. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it helps a lot, Chief. Thank you. So this survey is going out to our citizens. So are we also surveying our officers at the same time with the survey? Is there not an opportunity to do so at the same time? And I include RCMP in that too.
So I'll jump in again, Chair, if it's okay, through you to the Commissioner. So this would be a specific survey for the community. And there are surveys that are conducted internally for officers. And I know that they have happened recently in the past. They generally happen through HRM as part of the broader outreach through the business units and performance. That's not to say that we can't do something specific, but this particular one that we're discussing today is for the community to try to get a baseline, and it would be an opportunity to expand it from there. I think, we haven't even, we don't even have a supplier yet. We haven't agreed on that. We thought we had one, but we didn't have any process in place. So this current RFP process and the review and feedback from those that are on the committee will inform, which way we go externally. And then we've already talked about 2 potential internal options, and then we can branch out from there and then see where we end up. But again, it has to be consultative, and we have to make sure we're including everyone.
One last question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So is there an opportunity, Chief, for the Board of Police Commissioners to see the the last draft of the questions before it actually is a thumbs up, just so we have an understanding of what's the questions are being asked, and maybe another set of eyes we could be recommending or suggesting or asking for either additional questions or maybe change of wording. Not that I want to get into wordsmithing, but is there a chance for us to have some input to the questions? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, absolutely is the answer. I think it's vital and vitally important that the board be integral in this process and have that input on the questions. None of them are agreed upon yet. I know there's, suggested questions nationally and through other police services and other provinces. I think collectively we have to, and it's my view, and sit down and have those discussions and allow not only the board, but allow the community to have input in the questions. And that's what we hope to obtain through focus groups and other mechanisms of reach out.
Thank you, Chief, for that clarification. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Tony. Lindell.
Thanks. My question was related to the procurement process, and I think the chief answered it, but just for clarification. So does the chief of police have the same type of leeway as our CAO? I can't even think of the acronym right now. Our CAO, in terms of being able to approve procurement under a certain amount?
Madam Chair, I think I heard my name taken in vain, so, but I missed the question, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I had a brain moment where I couldn't even think of your title. But my question was really, does Dan, as the chief of police, have the same type of leeway when it comes to accepting procurement contracts under, I don't know what the amount for a chief of police would be, but does there, and really the question at the end of the day is, does it need to come back to the commission to approve the final budgetary aspect of the survey?
I particularly don't recall what Dan's authority is. I think it may be 100,000 based on my reckon, but Dan probably can answer that question better than I can as to what his actual authority is. You have to go back to the policy to see what all that is. There are certain thresholds, so I can approve certain things without tender up to, right, I think it's $25,000 without a tender on an emergency basis, and I think there's some other provisions there for sole sourcing under certain emergency provisions. I can't recall what the actual detail is, but we can certainly look into that and report back. Dan, you have any comments? I think you have, as a director, have a certain threshold you can actually approve without my authority or the board's authority, as long as it's budgeted.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, and thanks, CAO. And the CAO mentioned it is 100,000 for the chief. In certain circumstances, there's others where it wouldn't be. The tender process is there. I believe it's 10,000 for me. Beyond the tender process has to go outside. So there is very strict rules in regards to what we can do and how we do it. And I can tell you that we work very closely with Rcmp procurement, particularly if there are areas where we need clarification, and we do that as an organization and a business unit, obviously in conjunction with the CAO. Okay, so, and as you said earlier, Chief, that it's going to come back to the commission when we have to discuss the budgetary aspect, because as you said, we're constrained right now. So I'll wait till that discussion comes forward, and we'll go from there. Other than that, we had a discussion on the survey itself, so I look forward to seeing what comes back in the future. Thanks.
Okay, Tony Thomas. Good. So I just had to comment Tony Mancini's point about a survey of the members. That is a separate recommendation under Wortley. So there are discussions going on about that. It's very clear in that there's one recommendation on surveying the community, and then there is a separate one about surveying the policing, whether that be HRP or RCMP. So that is underway, in flight, as per your new terminology. Okay, next up on the agenda is was 10.1.3, the Rcmp request for an additional resource, and Chief Superintendent Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. The previous request for staff sergeant at this point will be withdrawn in respect to the current budget pressures and cutbacks that have been impacted us all as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not to say that the request will not be submitted in the fall. However, we're currently assessing and continue to do so our resourcing pressures, this being one, and we will be submitting an overarching request at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Superintendent. I'll assume there'll be no questions because we'll have further discussion. Don't see anybody waving their hand. Great. Next item is the Memorandum of Understanding between the Bopc, HRM, and Rcmp. So just a reminder for folks, actually before I talk, Marty, are you okay to speak on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so where this had come from, there were some discussions, internally about the MOU. There were some, questions raised from the Department of Justice about the MOU. So Catherine Salzman had gone away to look at some of the history and sort of, where the MOU came from. So she had put together a memo that really provided us with the background and understanding that we need as to how we, the purpose of the memo, how we work with it, and what it really means. So what I'll do is turn it over to Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as everybody knows, the background of this is it's really a matter of practicality. If you look at we all know that the legislation that the board works under and the police work under, including the Police Act and the Board of Police Commissioners bylaw and the regulations, and there's a certain amount of overlap, as we've seen time and time again, and a lack of clarity. And the Police Act is not the best drafted piece of legislation to operate under. So at some time, many years ago, the parties who were most affected by this decided that they would sort of get together and sort of agree on an understanding of what their roles were in relation to each other. And that's the genesis of this agreement. So, but at the same time, they didn't want to commit to a legally enforceable agreement. So basically, it's a memorandum of understanding of what each of these agencies considers that its role is, right, in the sort of overall process here. And so at any time, any one of those parties could change their mind, take a different view, or whatever. But it was more a matter of almost an administrative guide as to how they saw themselves and how we would go forward. So that was, I believe, 20 years ago now. And so from time to time, it comes up. It largely accords with the legislation, but I mean, if there was a difference between this and any of the legislation clearly governs, because the legislation is legally enforceable, right? But this is sort of an operational guidance for these agencies. Now, the Department of Justice is not included in this, and nobody is trying to enforce this agreement, suggest that they're bound by it, or trying to enforce this agreement against them, right? But it is a guideline. There's further guidelines in relation to these agencies. If you look at the Board of Police Commissioners bylaw, there's a discussion there about resourcing and the provincial police resourcing and that sort of thing. That's a complement to this. So that was the question. The first question was put was, is it legally enforceable? And no, it's a memorandum of understanding between the parties. The second question was put, well, is there a point in amending this to include the Department of Justice? Well, if the Department of Justice would like to enter into the memorandum of understanding with the other parties, then that would be fine, right? But if they don't, that doesn't affect necessarily the agreement in its operation. So I think that's the executive summary of what Catherine said. And if there are any questions, I can answer those.
So just a summary, I had some conversations with Catherine as well, and essentially what she said was this just helps us understand, what the processes are in place, particularly around the budget ask from the Rcmp, and that it puts a framework and a structure around it, that we will try to adhere to as much as possible because it is consistent with the legislation, and it's not something that is written in stone type of thing. But in order to provide continuity and transparency and clarity around the process, that's really what it's for. So that was my non-lawyerly summary of what my understanding was in talking to Catherine. So I'll put it
better than mine. Probably better than mine, Natalie. Thank you.
I'll mark this down, Marty, as one of my personal achievements. So questions or comments, Carol? No. Carlos?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Great. Lisa? No. Tony Mancini? No. Lindell? Lindell, I can't see you if you're shaking your head. I don't know why you're not on my screen.
I'm good.
Okay, good. Tony Thomas?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Great. So I think that's just to help sort of set the stage as we go forward with how we will use that MOU. I think what we need to do, just I'll make a note, is I put together the schedule of items sort of throughout the year for the board to consider. So we had left the timing of some of the things that were related to that MOU to be determined. So I'll make sure that that's updated and that is included within the board package on a go forward basis. So thank you very much, Marty, and everybody on that one. So we'll move to 10.2. So Marty, did you want to weigh in? I know you were looking at some information about, with regard to Lindell's question about the process around that, the motion.
Okay. I had a look at the motion just to double check, and the motion is actually to appoint a community advisory committee. Okay, so it wasn't really just to discuss whether to appoint; it was to appoint. So the question then becomes: I had assumed from that, and Lindell may have assumed something differently, but I had assumed from that and understood that that would involve a discussion of an individual or individuals with respect to chairing that committee. And as the councillors would know, that is traditionally treated as a matter that's discussed in camera. So basically, it's this: if we're talking about a discussion of the committee in terms of process or something else that does not involve the discussion of individuals, right? Then I guess it does not have to go in camera, right? If indeed you're going to talk about individuals or proposals for individuals, that is, well, it doesn't have to be in camera. That's normally takes place in camera, and there's a reference here. If you look at the appointment policy, which granted only applies if the council's procedure applies with modification here, but if you look at the appointment policy, it's clear from the spirit of that policy, right, that when names come forward and personalities are going to be discussed, that discussion should take place in camera. So leaving it at that, I'm not sure whatever the board's wishes with respect to that.
Yeah, so I think that was the process, that was the intent today, was to talk about who would be appointed and who would be leading that. So it would be a discussion about specific individuals. And then I think you said that would be ratified in public. And then I think then we talk about, that specific individual. There's a conversation to be had in public there about what that process will look like and sort of the further details around the how. So the plan today was the who, and then we would decide how we would move forward with the discussion on the how.
May I speak, please?
I was muted. Go ahead, Lindell.
Yeah. So thank you. So I was very, very unclear then at our last discussion or our last meeting. So what I thought, and maybe this is my fault for not understanding the process, but what I thought is we were going to discuss at this meeting whether or not we were going to appoint a committee or not. So if I knew at that time that we were voting to actually create the committee, I would have actually voted against it. So at the time, I thought that we were voting to discuss it at the next meeting on whether or not we wanted to create the committee or not. So that was my thought, and I think I just might have been unclear on that piece. So if that's the case, then I will, because I voted for it, I will go in camera with the committee. But I would have voted against it if I knew that we weren't going to have that discussion in public first.
Marty, do you have the motion there in front of you? Can you just read the motion? And Tony, I do see your hand. You'll come to you next.
Thank you.
Marty, you're muted.
Okay, am I okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. That the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners appoint a community advisory committee to assist in adopting a definition of defunding the police, and that the committee present this definition at a future meeting of the board for further discussion and debate. And then it goes on to talk about several things that would be included in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the motion is clear that it's about appointing the committee. Tony Mancini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Commissioner Smith 100%. The conversation, there was a motion put on the floor. That motion didn't have a seconder, so Commissioner McDougall put this motion on the floor. And the lawyer, Marty, you said to us, if we approve, the question was asked clearly, if we approve that motion of this Commissioner McDougall, then that would be brought forward to this meeting for discussion. So again, we didn't agree upon creating a committee. That's what our expectation was today. We were going to have that discussion. So it's premature to be discussing, in my opinion, any member of that committee. And that's exactly, and I'm sure we look back to the minutes. I hope the minutes reflect that.
Well,
so, yeah, go ahead, Marty. I was just going to say, Marty.
Well, I guess my understanding was that the motion was to appoint a committee, and then it would be coming back to the board to discuss what to do in terms of how to do that and who to do it with. So that was my understanding. But the motion is there, and it was recorded and voted on. So.
Yeah. And that was my understanding as well, Marty. Why don't I go through the speaker? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tony, and then I'll go to the speaker list.
So can we have can Robin look at the minutes, see how that's reflected in the minutes? Because the question was specifically asked to you, Marty, what is the result of approving Carol's motion? And you said to us, that just brings it forward to this meeting for discussion. That's how I interpret it. And I suspect others might interpret the same way. So if we can have maybe see if the minutes reflected any differently.
Well, basically, when you bring it forward in camera, right, you can discuss what you want to do with the motion, right? But it's a different thing. The motion was there. I guess we'd have to go back, check the minutes. But what I said didn't change the motion. I mean, the motion, Carol's motion, and Carol can speak to this probably. Carol's motion, Carol intended to change what Natalie had put forward originally to add the appointment of the committee. That was my understanding. Carol, is that not correct?
So I originally moved the motion that had no seconder. And I mentioned that, in fact, I would like to see a community voice included in that, however it was articulated in a motion, and move that. And because I too, I confess, was under the understanding that this would come forward to this meeting for discussion. And I seem to have the same interpretation as Lindell, who seconded my motion, because I was feeling a little kind of insecure about what the process was when I made the motion, the second motion with the Community Advisory Committee included. And I understood that we would be discussing whether we would do that at this meeting. And I that's kind of what I thought based on the advice we heard that day. So I have the minutes here like all of you, and I'm happy to look at them again.
Let's just hang on one sec. Lisa, you had.
Yeah, just wanted to weigh in on this. My interpretation was the exact as Tony's and Carol's. I mean, I do remember that we had conversations about whether or not even a notice of motion was necessary for this, because it was, you know, it just sort of, the motion was made in the aftermath of the first one not getting a seconder. And then I do remember that there was specific discussion about notices of motion. So it was my intention to come here today to discuss the merits, dismerits of striking a committee, and then, you know, certainly agree in camera if we're going to be talking names, then yes, by all means in camera. But that's this initial conversation, I think, definitely has to be done in public, and it was my intention that that was what was going to happen today. Thank you.
Yeah, so unfortunately that's inconsistent with the motion that Marty had read. Robin, did you pull the minutes out there? I guess we've, Marty, start thinking from a process point of view as she's pulling those minutes out, because I think, you know, this speaks to the, you know, the confusion that there was at the meeting. The wording of the motion is very, very clear. And that was certainly, you know, clear at the meeting and clear in the minutes. So I guess pending Robin's confirmation of what's in there, whether there's anything in there that matters, where does that leave us if we have a number of commissioners who are now stating that they do not support the motion that was passed at the last meeting? So while that's going on, I'm just going to flip over to Carlos. Carlos, to see if you had any comments or questions at this time.
I do, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm a little bit confused as well, because I thought at the last meeting, in order for us to move forward with discussion, we had to simply define defunding the police. And so that's where I'm a little bit lost, because we didn't really have a discussion on it. We just simply said whether or not we were going to have a community board look at the defunding the police, but we didn't actually discuss anything. So I'm a little bit confused there. So, and if not, I think we should save some time and vote whether or not we want to have the discussion. And if so, let's move forward.
I think one of the issues here is, I guess, perhaps because we're doing virtually, but every motion that's put forward, I guess we should have read back or posted on the screen, so everybody knows exactly what it says before they vote or not, right? Because that's my thought about this, and I don't know whether this motion was read back before the vote or not. I have the minutes help us with that.
Yeah, and I think that's important go forward, because the motion was voted. Whether people what the interpretation was, I certainly can't speak to, but the wording is certainly clear. So I think, again, making sure that as we go forward, we're very clear about sort of expressing concerns and questions and clarification, I think is really critical. Tony Thomas, did you have questions or comments?
No, I just sort of agree with what everybody else was saying there. It was my understanding, because it was very confusing there with the motions that were going back and forth. But I was with the understanding that we would move forward so we can discuss at this meeting.
Lindell?
Thanks. So it's funny, I'm on both sides of this in terms of supporting and not supporting, because as Marty and you said, Chair, you are correct. When you look at the motion, we technically did say we were going to create the committee. So that is, there's no debating that is a motion, and that's what we approved as the commission. But the miscommunication and the misunderstanding that's happening here with members is that what we thought was we were going to have that discussion on whether or not we were going to create that committee today, because there was no debate whatsoever on that item during that day, and we all decided not to have debate, assuming we were going to have debate today. So I think the process, in terms of the process, we missed a step beforehand that we should have done at the time of the meeting, and now we're kind of facing the consequences of dealing with the motion that we did approve and we agreed with at the time, and now we have to deal with. So I don't know. What I think has to happen is we have to move forward with our current process, even if we didn't agree, or I don't know how we deal with our little constitutional conundrum right now, because we're in two places right now.
Yeah, Marty.
Maybe I can help. Maybe I can help. I think you've got some choices. It seems the confusion was over whether we were going to decide to appoint a committee and then debate what that was going to be like and who'd be there and the rest, and what groups be represented and all that kind of discussion, or whether the discussion was going to be whether to have a committee at all, right? And it seems there's some confusion there. So we got a couple options. One of the options is that we go into that we have a debate now, right, as to whether you want to defer this process. That's one option, right? You can defer it and well, you can have a discussion, frankly, going in camera, have a discussion about the issue, and then you can decide to defer it if you want, which will mean not going ahead, right? You can alternatively have that discussion and go ahead with some sort of appointment, right? And the third thing, you could bring a motion, you give notice to bring a motion to rescind the motion from the last meeting, which would take place at the following meeting of council. So, I mean, of the board. So that's what I see as your three options here.
So Carol, you had indicated you wanted to speak?
Let me just, one other thing. It doesn't mean that you have to appoint a committee today. Okay, you've got the motion before you. You can still debate it, but you can then defer it if you want to your next meeting or whatever you want to do with it, is what I'm saying. Or you could appoint your committee, or alternatively, you could rescind the motion and take it back to square one. But rescission couldn't take place at this meeting. It would have to take place, give notice of this meeting to go next meeting. Okay?
So I really feel quite strongly about the community voice being part of the defining process. It's important to me that community is there to lead that definition of defunding. That doesn't take away from what I thought I heard as I revised that motion on July 9th. My understanding was that there was unanimous support for the motion and that we would go forward here today and discuss the motion. That doesn't change any of my intent, my hope for the result, but I did think that there would be a discussion about that today. So I don't know that that helps in any way, and I would hope that we would go in camera and have the discussion about the who, and maybe that will resolve some of this, but I just would like us to keep moving forward on it. Because I think a delay is really critical at this, or delay is not what we want to do at this point.
So what I would propose we do is let's leave this to the in-camera portion, because there's potentially some discussion about specific individuals. So let's take it to the in-camera portion. We can have a full discussion about that at that point in time, and then we can come to some agreement. I'm very concerned and frankly opposed to further delay. I think, people are, trying to look for quick things to do, and I think this is something that we have to get right, and we have to discuss it now. So I'm really concerned with any delaying to a future meeting, any discussion on that. So if everyone is in agreement, let's get to the in-camera portion at the appropriate time on the agenda and see where we get at that point in time. Does that work for everybody? Yeah. Carlos? You're good?
Yep.
Tony Thomas, I see is good. So that's what we'll do is let's take it to the in-camera portion and see where we get there. So the next item on the agenda is the BOPC work plan update. Correct, Robin? Sorry, I've got to flip between documents here. Yes. So included in the package for folks was a copy of the work plan with the items assigned. So what I'd like to do is go through each of the items and get an update from those commissioners who do have responsibility for those items for a status update, or commissioners or staff. So the first item is the action plan on the Wortley recommendation. And again, develop and document an action plan with the Rcmp and the HRP, monitor the plan on a regular basis and collaborate with other stakeholders as required. So I think we've discussed that up until this point, that there are a number of tracking documents, including one that I use that is updated on a monthly basis with the meetings with both of the chiefs on that. I see Lindell, you are also assigned to that one, as well as Commissioner McDougall. So certainly as we move forward with looking at how we will refine that and how it will be made public, and then whatever comes from council's discussion on that, we'll make sure that you are both involved with that as go forward. So that one is certainly in flight and underway, and has been for a number of months, as you've heard from the updates we provided each meeting. The next one is review of the governance, roles, and responsibilities to identify opportunities. So there was a review of the staff report, the police act and the bylaws, the budget, external committees, etc. And that was assigned to the CAO and staff with assistance from Commissioner McDougall. Jacques, I know it's been a challenging time from a COVID perspective. Any update or plan as to how we move that forward?
In relation to face-to-face meetings you're talking about?
Well, just if you look at the work plan, item number 2. I don't know if you have it in front of you there.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so it just says the objective is to review the BOPC governance, roles, and responsibilities to identify opportunities. And the action items were review the staff report resulting from the governance review, review of the police act and bylaws, review of the budget to determine potential for additional resources support for the board itself, whether external committees or advice could support the board's work, and determine if the board differs from other council committees managed by the clerk's office and what the impacts would be on things such as member recruitment.
Right, yeah, I don't really have an update for you today, but I'll certainly I'll take that back and come back to you when I have looked at it all in greater detail.
Hi, Natalie, and just letting you know you're muted.
Thank you, Robin. Item 3 was explore increasing public participation in meetings. Talked about a board review of public participation, distribute a report regarding regional processes for public participation, conduct more meetings in community, develop recommendations for BOPC review, manage public expectations for off-site meetings, and look at opportunities for external BOPC advisory input. And Commissioner Smith, that one was assigned to you.
Yeah, so thank you. On this one, so I have in my own bubble thought about this and done some research and kind of wrote some thoughts down. But what I'm realizing now, and this was kind of a discussion we had in the past, is as the commission, how do we pull more of our weight? So I don't know what and who. Maybe you can help me, or whoever's here, the chief can help me. Who is the staff, the best person to work with staff on this? Is this with the communications, the government relations? Is this with, I'm not sure who. So I think in the next piece for me, and to dig deeper and to be able to give you a better report on it next time, is who would be the person in staff that would support this?
I would think it would have to be someone from HRM, because the public participation, that's set out in the board policies, I believe.
Yeah.
So
right.
Maybe in conjunction with Jacques, or perhaps even Robin could assist with that, because I think that's where you need to start with that.
So Jacques, I know you're here, obviously. So what I'll do is, Jacques, I'll reach out to you and maybe even the chief to have an initial discussion of who in staff can support looking at these items, and then we'll go from there. So I'll take that back, and then hopefully next meeting I can give you more of an update of how that approach is going to happen.
Thanks, Lindell. The next item was to engage with the foundation. So it was assist with member recruitment, recommend grant recipients, promote the work of the foundation, and to make sure that a BOPC representative participates in the foundation meetings. And that was assigned to me. So the foundation work is ongoing. There was a meeting just prior to COVID that talked about member recruitment and our roles as members on the foundation board. A grant was announced. I believe Dan had provided the update previously to the Halifax Regional Police Youth Group. I'm sorry if I got that name wrong. I can never remember what that group is. They were provided with a grant that will allow them to expand their membership and to involve more young people in the community. Certainly with COVID, that maintains a challenge now, as certainly does the meetings. So I think the plan will be that we'll have an update on the foundation activities at an upcoming meeting, and that may be something that we'll look at doing as a regularly scheduled item, but there has been work ongoing from a foundation perspective. The next item, number 5, is providing training for our board members, including media training, financial literacy, the African Canadian Experience Program with the Rcmp, and bias awareness training. And Commissioner Blackburn, that one was assigned to you. Is there an update?
Yes. Just a very brief one. Started to outline what some of the goals and objectives would be for a media training, an overview of the media landscape here in Halifax, what to expect when reporters call, just a little bit of the inner workings of newsrooms in HRM, and just started to explore pricing for that when, of course, we all know what happened. So I'm just wondering, is there an appetite to do this online, or would you prefer to pursue this when we can all be together with a facilitator? Just sort of looking for some guidance there more than anything.
Any preference either way for any of the commissioners? No, don't see a preference either way, Lisa. So maybe we'll leave that with you in determining, once you figured out who the facilitators are and the timing, okay, maybe something to come back to the board with.
All right. So if nobody is wildly opposed to pursuing this online, I think most of the folks that I've been in touch with in the past that do this type of training, I think they've all moved to online formats. So I will explore that further in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So item 6 is determine the evaluation process for the objectives. So we had established that transparency, trust, awareness of the function of the board, and public education and awareness were the measurements that we wanted to look at. But there was nobody at that point in time who that was assigned to. Is there anybody have a particular interest at this point in time in taking the lead on that? Okay, so maybe I'll leave that with folks, perhaps to mull it over and think about it. Would love to have some additional participation from one of the commissioners in taking the lead on that. And then item number 7 is ongoing support for the commissioners, reviewing the policy framework, establishing exited interviews, and implementing a transition period for members or mentorship period. And Commissioner McDougall, you had been assigned to that one. Is there an update?
No, I'm lax on this and the next one, since my name is attached to the other, or to number 8 as well. Number 8 actually refers to communication plan, and I had started to work with, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but I'd started to work with HRP and would have reached out to Rcmp around communications plan, but then that all stopped. But one of the things that I did agree to do, and I would need some legal advice on this, is to review our own policy documents that need some updating, need some spell check, that kind of thing. And I will endeavor to look at that over the next month and report back in August, if that's when we're meeting again.
That's great. Thanks, Carol. So we'll take that as the update for the last 2. So just as a reminder, Lindell?
Yep, sorry. What I can, because number 3 is somewhat related in terms of communications and collaboration, I don't mind doing those 2 at the same time with Carol with number 8, not number 7, number 8. Develop communications plan for Bopc and define collaboration with, the number 8. I'm not going to read everything, but because there's no one assigned to lead it. Carol is assigned to assist both 7 and 8. So I think with 3 and 8 having similarities, they probably could do both of them at the same time if that helps.
Yep, that's great. So what we can do is update the document to reflect that those items are related, and that items number 3 and number 8 are related, and that you and Carol will be collaborating on those go forward.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Lindell.
Right. So just as a reminder for folks, the work plan update is now part of the standard updates for the board agendas. Will be done every 2 months. I never remember if that's bi-monthly or semi-monthly or whatever it is. So certainly encourage those members who have items assigned to them, to ensure that those are moving forward and to be able to provide that update. And also for those who do not have an item assigned to them, to encourage them certainly to participate, whether assisting other commissioners or taking responsibility for some of the items. I think our success is really dependent on, an equitable sharing of the work. And certainly from a chair perspective, I've got lots on my plate. So again, would encourage all the commissioners to make sure that, they're engaged with the items in the work plan and providing that update to us on a regular basis as we go forward. So thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Nova Scotia Policing Policy Working Group. So you folks would have gotten in their correspondence some information from the working group with some recommendations and some suggestions. I just wanted to start, by saying there are a number of things in the recommendations that are part of the work plan. So the public participation in the meeting is certainly one that they have weighed in on. Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. Sorry, I've got multiple documents on the go here. It just makes it a little bit of a challenge. So I think, you know, work is happening on some of those that will address some of those things. I think there were comments about body cameras, and certainly that is on the agenda for discussion today. There was some talk about the definition of defunding, which we're going to have some further discussion about as well. So, you know, I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know, the concerns expressed and the access to HRP policies are not different from the work that is in front of us, and certainly will be part of that discussion. So we do have the information that they've provided there for information and to help inform some of the work that goes forward. So just wanting to acknowledge that, and certainly for those of you who do have items on the work plan that are aligned with the information that has been provided by the working group, just a reminder that that's good information, and you know, certainly to take that in consideration as you move forward on those specific agenda items. So that was sort of the point I wanted to make. Were there any other comments from the commissioners on the correspondence that we did receive from the working group? Carol, I see a no. Lindell, I see a no. Lisa as a no. Tony Thomas, you're good. Tony Mancini, I can't see your face. You're good. Carlos?
I'm good to go.
Okay, that's great. So moving along, the next item is 10.2.4, which is regarding Halifax Regional Council's motion of rescission regarding the armored rescue vehicle. So this is being brought forward because there certainly have been a lot of questions about the board's area or the board's responsibility when it comes to the decision that was made on the ARV. We did have a presentation, I believe, when Chief Blay was here with Inspector Butler, I believe, or who's now Deputy Chief Butler. Sorry, I don't remember what his old title was, around that. So the question really came forward about when it comes to capital budget items, because if you recall, as the Board of Police Commissioners, we have responsibility and oversight for the HRP budget, which is the 89 million and change that form part of the budget recommendations and the discussion, whereas items such as fleet, which would include the ARV, are part of the capital budget, which aren't included under that envelope. So I really had wanted Jacques and Marty to perhaps talk a little bit about sort of our responsibility from a budget perspective, and then depending on, you know, what responsibility we do or don't have as a budget perspective, really from an, you know, a board oversight perspective, what that role would be in that type of decision making. So I'm thinking it's Jacques who's going to speak first, but I'm happy to be corrected. Jacques, oh, there he is.
I'm back, yeah. Thank you. Can I just get some clarity as to what the question is again?
Yeah, the question is really, does the board have oversight on that capital budget? Because the capital budget is for a police-related item. And if the answer is, depending on the answer, what responsibility do we have within our role when it comes to the capital budget items? Is it oversight? Is it just awareness? Sort of how would you define that?
Yeah, the capital budget is certainly council's to direct and adopt. The way it works internally is that we have a working committee, steering committee, and a working group. Dan is part of what I call the steering committee. He has folks on his team that are part of the working group. that all the capital requirements from all business units flow through to the steering committee from the working group. We then take that budget to council, proposed budget to council. Certainly there would be any items that Dan would want in the capital budget. There's nothing preventing him from going to the board to seek to advise them of what the capital budget is and what his requests are through the council. So, for example, some of the items like I believe using the armored vehicle for an example, I think we advised the board that was going to be happening, and it was part of the budget. There's another capital item that's going to be coming to a news channel near the boards at some point, which would be the new police station. So at some point, Dan will likely want to apprise the board of the need and what's being sought from council on the capital budget side. So the capital budget generally involves different funding sources through taxation, meaning that any debt would be borne by the city. So the Board of Police Commissioners budget does not include the debt that is absorbed by the council through fiscal services. So that's partly why it happens that way. That capital expenditures are really the pre-review of council, not necessarily the board. Would there be an occasion where Dan would appreciate and seek out the guidance or the input from the Board of Police Commissioners on a capital item? Likely. That may happen in the future. I can't predict exactly what circumstances they may be, but certainly, fundamentally, the capital budget is a process owned by council. Council can also ask for the board's input on capital items. So let's say, as CAO, I bring a capital budget before council. Council may well direct me to go back and seek input from various stakeholders, including the Board of Police Commissioners, as appropriate. So that's sort of how it works. I'll certainly take any questions and invite Marty to weigh in as he deems appropriate. And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I have to get off the call because I have another conference call that's waiting for me right now. So I certainly would appreciate any question you may have right now so I can get on my other call.
I couldn't put it any more eloquently than the CAO. That's it. That's it. Period.
Good. Everyone's speaking for Marty today. That's rare. So I guess the only thing I would add, Jacques, is Lindell did put forward a motion at a previous meeting that was consistent with what you said, that did ask that Dan bring forward any capital budget related items to the board for discussion before they were brought forward to council as a recommendation. So I think, again, that is consistent with what you were saying. So the purpose of this was really just to provide that clarity for the board around what our role is from a capital budget perspective. So Carol, did you have any questions for Jacques? I guess, does anybody have any questions for Jacques? We'll do that and let him go, and then we can discuss a little more if need be. I'm seeing everyone's good. Carlos, you're okay?
I'm good, thanks.
All right.
I have a question that actually might not be for Jacques, but I'll ask it now just in case it is. So if we, as a commission, this is future meetings, an item comes up where we feel that the commission needs to give an opinion. So say I'll use the armored vehicle because that's relevant. If we get the presentation and then the commission agrees that they either support or don't support it, should there be like a note that would be sent to the budget committee saying, as an FYI, the police commission, supports or doesn't support this budgetary item that's outside of their view? I'm just wondering if there is room for us to also, because one of the comments we heard during the discussion was, well, we don't know what the commission feels and we don't know what they said, and we don't know we just don't know what the commission's approval of this item was. As Jacques said, it wasn't in the commission's purview to approve that item or not, but I'm wondering is if we're going to get these if we're going to get these capital items from the motion that was passed some time ago, should we also be sending some kind of, I don't know what it is, note, memo to council giving the commission's position to kind of deter what happened at council when everyone was asking what's the commission's stake in this?
Yeah, thanks for that. Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly the board, can provide whatever advice it deems appropriate to council. The capital budget process is council's budget process. So, Dan has been asked to provide, the board with a list of capital items he feels is appropriate that he's submitted through the stated process going forward. If the board has a view on that, I don't think there's anything in stopping the board from expressing that view to Dan, to me, or the council, at whatever time it feels appropriate. So that's certainly within your rights to do as a board. And I mean, I can hardly think of anything that would prevent that, or why that would be a bad idea. You know what I mean? So I think that's fine. I think, it's like anything else. We have a governance model here. You hire people, professionals to manage the place, and those folks bring their professional advice to council and to the board. In the case of the board, you have Dan and Janice who bring you advice and thoughts. And if you vehemently disagree with any of that advice, then it's certainly your responsibility and your duty to in fact say so. In my opinion, and that's why democracy works, right? So the way the system works, and so certainly encourage any feedback.
Okay, seeing no other questions for Jacques. Jacques, thank you very much, and we'll allow you to go ahead. So I think, just Lindell, to your point, just for simplicity's sake, I think if there's a specific statement around the capital budget piece, Dan is the person we'll be having that conversation with as part of the agenda. So really that's where that message should be carried back, is through Dan and his discussions with council on the capital portion of the budget.
So the question, sorry.
I would only add that going forward, perhaps after this experience, that the budget committee may also at the same time be looking to the Board of Police Commissioners for some indication of what they think of certain items, right?
Okay.
So that was going to be my comment. So for example, say we did go through the chief as a commission. The chief was providing us his professional opinion on why we needed the armored vehicle at the time, and would we then, as the commission, be expecting the chief to say, well, I support this for these reasons, but the police commission doesn't support it for these reasons? Or so I'm just wondering, for future discussions, how we do that in a simple, not convoluted way, where we're giving our opinion, either it's through the chief, and the chief gives the disclaimer that this is the commission standpoint, or do we as a commission send a note attached to that item with our opinion? So just thinking of what that would look like in the future.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, remember too that the chair does do a presentation to the council on the budget. So that rather than putting the onus on Dan perhaps to defend, our decision, that might be the appropriate place for it as well in the presentation from the chair to council. Okay.
And also, I would only add that it may well depend on what the issue is, Lindell, too, right? How big an issue is,
I think they should get new cars. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We'll either use Dan or the presentation to the chair presentation to council on budget items to address anything specific from a capital perspective that doesn't fall under our area of responsibility. So that's great. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 10.2.5, which is the body-worn video pilot project. And Commissioner Mancini has put forward a motion that states that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request a report detailing the feasibility of a body-worn video pilot program for Halifax Regional Police and Halifax District RCMP patrol officers that address cost, benefits, and technological requirements. So over to you, Commissioner Mancini. Tony, you're muted.
Thank you. I'll put the motion on the floor so that we can discuss it. That the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request a report detailing the feasibility of a body-worn video pilot program for Halifax Regional Police and Halifax District RCMP patrol officers that addresses costs, benefits, and technological requirements. So moved.
So move. Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Sorry, I didn't catch who that was. Was that Lisa? Oh, that's Carlos, seconded by Carlos. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, did you want to make a sort of a statement, Tony, and then I'll go through the order of speakers?
Yeah, thank you, Carlos, for seconding that. So this motion had come, we had this discussion not that long ago under Chief Blay when he was with us. At the time, Chief Blay was not a real fan of the consideration of body-worn cameras. At the time, his opposition to it was the overall cost, and his biggest opposition was the security. Where do you store the data? How do you store the data? How do you access the data? So he had major concerns about that at the time. There's been a lot of interest around this at that time and still to this day from the community. And in fact, I even hear it from some police officers too, the interest of trying the pilot program on the cameras. And all we have to do is look down to the south with the terrible tragedy with George Floyd. Even recently, body camera footage had come up after the terrible footage that we've all seen numerous times on TV. And that footage showed that the interaction from the police from the start was really, not a good interaction. And so we've had situations here in HRM in recent history where we had an incident at Walmart, an incident in Bedford, and there have been others too. Now CERT are investigating those incidents. Would footage from a body-worn camera be helpful with CERT's investigation? I look at this as just one small piece of the puzzle that we're trying to deal here. It's with providing our officers and with the resources and tools that are necessary to do the job. Even recently, Prime Minister Trudeau announced at one of his press conferences that all RCMP officers will be wearing body-worn cameras. Back when we last looked at this, I believe per officer was something around 20 grand per officer to have that officer with the camera along with the security. The more recent investigation from myself and some of my colleagues is around $2,000 to $3,000 per person, which including the security. And there's a lot of questions around cameras too. So what happens if a camera is turned off? As we hear about that in other jurisdictions. What's the result of that? That's a very valid question. Who owns the data? Is that owned by the police department? Is that owned by HRM? Is that the responsibility of the Board of Police Commission? So there's a lot of questions around this, but I think with our climate right now, it's worth the investigating. I will share one more point is that there's a lot of folks that are out there advocating to defund the police. The last thing they want is to be adding more money to the police department to do exactly this. But this is something that is not only, in my opinion, I look at it as not only for the safety of our citizens, which it is absolutely, but it's also for the safety of our police officers. So I think it's worthwhile to do further investigation. So let's make sure the research is done. What is the exact cost involved? Let's look at a target group within the police department. I would like to hear also from not only HRP, but RCMP, and what's their directive since I made the comments about the police department. So I hope that everyone here supports this motion. I think it's worthwhile and it's quite timely for us to take on this endeavor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Carol?
So I'm just wondering, we can request this report, right, from HRM staff? Because that's where it will go. Is that, I'm assuming we can do that. with all the procedural comments we've had, I just want to be sure that
This,
we're not.
this in my mind would be a staff report that likely would have some input from HRP and RCMP as well, just due to the nature of the content.
Okay. And so we are able to do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So I think it's just being clear that the motion is asking for the information, and we are not asking to vote on the use of the pilot for the cameras right now.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think that ties into that.
I would like to hear from both Dan and Janice before I ask another question.
Hear from them on what specifically, Carol? You're muted. Not sure what your question to them is.
Sorry, response to this motion. I'd like to hear what they say about bringing back this report to us. Simple.
Chief Superintendent Gray, I can see you, so I'll let you go first.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair, through you, Chair. What I can say is that the RCMP is currently engaging with our contract partners to plan for the deployment of body-worn cameras to capture on-scene video, but also we have been participating in studies since 2010 and conducted a feasibility study in 2015. I would ask that any motion or requirement for the board, due to our federal legislation and requirements, that we be able to provide information separately from HRP as opposed to collectively. I think it would be confusing, and certainly for each department to provide appropriate data for each. It might be easier if we just keep that separate. It'd be difficult to put it together, but I'll let Chief Kinsella as well to provide his comments on that.
So through you, Chair, and thanks, Chief Superintendent Gray. I agree on the separate reports coming forward. I think that's a good idea. Lots has changed since 2017 in regards to technology, cloud storage, you know, even the batteries and how long they last and all those kind of things. There's a lot more competitors in the game right now as well. So the cost has come down over the years. And certainly there are a number of other services across Canada and certainly in the US that are using the technology that we can reach out to get the best for us. I believe that body-worn cameras can help with transparency and certainly help us build public trust. So I'm happy to work towards and in conjunction with Janice to bring those appropriate reports back for the consideration of the board.
Thanks, Chiefs. Carol, you had another question, you said?
No, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Carlos?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Tony, for bringing that motion forward. To me, this is about accountability. And what I will say is that as a Black citizen, I would feel a lot more comfortable knowing that a police officer is wearing a camera. So again, I think that this is very important in terms of oversight. I think we need to be able to understand those small interactions that the police are having on a daily with members of the public, so that we can be able to provide accurate oversight. And so, like I said, I wholeheartedly support this motion, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Thank you, Carlos. Lindell? Lindell, did you have any questions?
Yeah, my computer's just really slow. So thank you, Tony, for bringing this forward. The chief kind of hit on the point of the fact that things have changed, the technology has changed. So I'm happy that there's at least appetite to look at it. What I would hope would be included in this is also the policies or potential, I won't say the policies, potential policies around the actual body cam. So getting an idea, if this passes today, an idea what other jurisdictions do when it comes to body cams, because you know, as it was said before, it creates a sense of security, but also we have to understand that people have lost their lives globally when officers have worn body cams. We know that video evidence has been withheld for many weeks, many months, sometimes years when incidents happen. So, you know, my other concern around this is I think body cams are one piece, but the policies around it and the accountability piece is just as much as important as how much it costs, because we could spend millions of dollars on this and it takes a person 2 to 6 months to get that footage, which you know, could be acceptable or unacceptable. I don't know the process. I don't know how the technology would work. So I just hope that that is something that could be covered as well. And in just understanding what policies are in place around, if we're going to look across the border, you know, so I guess nationally and internationally, but also really making sure that we're doing it. If we do a pilot program, we're holding ourselves accountable for whatever might come out of it. So that's really my comments. I'll support this and happy to, but really my piece is the transparency and the accountability piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindell. Tony Thomas?
Yeah, I just want to thank Tony for bringing that forward. I also want to thank him for the information he sent me on the webinar that's happening on Wednesday. But like I said, I'm fully supportive of the police cam, and I'm looking forward for the next step in this process. Thank you.
And Janice has a comment.
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. Just wanted to comment further to Commissioner Smith's comment in regards to policies and procedures. Certainly, I agree. However, comparing or being prepared for, it's not just that, it's the legal complexities as well in regards to disclosure, timing of that, recognizing that whenever there is an event per se and there's body worn cameras involved, that there's a criminal legal requirement for disclosure, as well as, you know, protecting the integrity of an investigation. Thank you.
Dan, were you waving at me?
Yeah, I was. It wasn't hello. It was just to add a couple quick comments if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
So through you, Chair, just the other consideration, and Janice basically covered what I was going to say, is the whole Privacy Commission piece. And it'll probably need an analysis and assessment. So just to further it up, also along with the expense and further to Commissioner Lindell's comments, we also have to look at that piece of it to make sure that we have everything covered off, and that'll obviously form part of the report, but will take some time as well.
And Lisa Blackburn.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I very much agree with everything that has been said, but you know, the thing is that I think we have to manage expectations when it comes to this type of technology. I mean, this is not a single solution to a very complex problem. I know that there's some studies that have found only modest reduction in the use of force and civilian complaints when body cams were worn. And in order for these body cameras to work as they are intended, it needs to be adopted along with other systemic reforms. So, I mean, this is just one piece of the puzzle. And just recently saw an interview with Michael White, who is the co-author of the book Cops, Cameras, and Crisis. And he said, the key is to have realistic expectations about what body-worn cameras can accomplish. What they can't accomplish is fix decades of tension between the police and the community. And I think that is something that we very much need to keep in mind. And, you know, I think for the public, they need to have realistic expectations about who will have access to the footage. And I'm sure this will all come back in the report, but you know, there's going to have to be some frameworks put around who has access to that footage and for what reason. And you know, the answers to those questions go far beyond HRM. And of course, you know, there's federal legislation that has to be taken into consideration, and that is definitely at play here. And you know, the bottom line is that just because a force has body cams doesn't, you know, necessarily mean that you're going to be seeing the footage on the 6 o'clock news. You know, there are very strict rules in place regarding where and when this footage can be released. So I just ask the public to have realistic expectations about what these cameras can and cannot do. But in the meantime, I applaud Commissioner Mancini for bringing this forward, and will definitely vote to support it. Thank you.
And I would just comment as well that, again, just to be clear, that this is looking at the report that's gathering information on the body-worn cameras at this point in time. This is not a decision yay or nay on cameras, and it may take us a while to get to that decision as we start looking at the evidence and what we uncover. So I think that's important, I think, for clarity before we vote on the motion, and also from an expectation setting perspective. My sense of this, with what limited knowledge I have, is this is not an easy decision. This is not a straightforward decision, that it is fairly complex. So I think, again, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence around this and not, you know, rushing to a decision, you know, in order to make a decision for the sake of a decision, that we give this the time that it does need and that it does require in order for us to be able to make any type of decision around this. So I'm just looking at the comments. Don't see anything there. So the motion was made by Commissioner Mancini, was seconded by Carlos Beals. Any further discussion before I call the question?
Natalie?
Yes.
Natalie, you're going to need a friendly amendment in order to have separate reports. You need to take the S off request and move it into and add it to report. I think that'll do it. And then it'd probably be helpful to have the legislative assistant read the motion back before there's a vote. But so, Tony will first have to approve that as a friendly amendment.
Great. So I think, Tony, it's looking at that the Board of Police Commissioners request reports detailing the feasibility of body-worn video pilot program for Halifax Regional Police and Halifax District RCMP.
I'm just trying to get down here. Madam Chair, that's a friendly for me. I'm okay with that. Thank you. And if the seconder is okay with it.
Carlos, you're okay with that amendment?
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Great. So I know it's not Rob, and whoever's doing the minutes, can you just pop that into the chat? That revised wording. I'll just give you a minute there. So it's there that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request reports detailing the feasibility of body-worn video pilot program from the Halifax Regional Police and Halifax District RCMP that addresses cost, benefits, technological requirements. Great. So we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstainers? The motion is passed. Thank you, and thank you, Simon, for getting that in there for us. Okay, next item on the agenda is the former 10.2.6, traffic enforcement during the state of emergency. And Commissioner Mancini has a motion requesting an update on the status of traffic enforcement during traffic enforcement and community policing during COVID-19 and how council should be directing traffic related complaints. So do you want to put the motion on the floor, Tony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put the following motion on the floor that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners request an update dealing with the status of traffic enforcement and community policing during COVID-19 and how councillors should be directing traffic-related complaints. So moved.
Second.
I'll second Smith.
Oh, sorry. Moved by Councillor Mancini, seconded by Councillor Blackburn. Tony?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I promise it's the last one for the day, so it's no longer the Tony show. So there's two pieces of this. So since COVID-19 and the budget cuts of 3.5 million to the police department, the concern all along that obviously is going to have a change in service because we're cutting the budget by $3.5 million. All along, and Chief Kinsella will know my strong support for CROs as this community and around, getting lots of feedback here, this community and a lot of communities around North America and the world are concerned about our relationship with our citizens and our police department. And my experience has been, and I believe many of my colleagues here in HRM, the relationship between our community response officers and our community is the one relationship that we can rely upon that has a strong relationship. And I heard the chief superintendent say that their CROs are still active and working. So I'm understanding. I just want to hear from Chief Kinsella and also Superintendent Gray, also Chief Superintendent Gray, about the CRO program, where that is. My understanding it's starting to come back. They were deployed to patrol. I'd like to hear about that. The other issue is traffic. As regional councillors, and my colleagues here with me today, and I believe every other regional councillor will state, the number one complaint we get from citizens in normal circumstances is speeding. But since COVID-19, that is probably tripled in complaints. So I'd like to know where we are with regard to traffic enforcement. And I understand when it comes to speeding, there's a lot of responsibility within HRM. We have our own engineering issues with older roads that are built in the 70s or built wide. It encourages speeding. We have our traffic calming program that, in my opinion, we need to double the financial investment in that because the list is so long to change the engineering of streets. And the biggest one of all, since I have this platform, is our colleagues at the province who refused our request to allow this municipality to decide on what streets we can reduce speed limits on. And that's probably the biggest one of all. But in the meantime, traffic authorities and being able to go to traffic enforcement, to our CROs and say, we've got a traffic issue here, numerous complaints. They'll put up a speed sentry, they'll do radar work, they'll speak to traffic enforcement. So we had that communication before, which is not happening now. So we're very concerned. And so my ask is today to get an update on both those topics. But, our citizens are looking for us to help them when it comes to the issue of traffic and speeding. And I feel, to be honest, inadequate to be able to help them because of all the points I've made. And not all of it belongs to HRP. Some of it's us, but there is that HRP element. So I'd like to hear from both chiefs on it and my comments from the rest of my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Carol? Comments or questions?
I don't have any questions at this time.
All right. Carlos?
Thank you. I don't have any questions as well.
Lisa?
No questions. Just looking forward to hearing the chiefs weigh in. Thank you.
Great. Lindell, you're good? Right. And Tony Thomas has left. Just a couple of comments from my perspective. I think when we had talked about, the changes in operations during COVID, I'll just remind folks that we certainly did establish what the priorities were at that point in time, and the community response officers were part of that, with the understanding that, as things persisted or if there were impacts, on resources that, it would necessitate, making sure that core services, sort of the safety services and emergency services, some of that may need to draw on resources from those other areas to continue. And that was a commitment from both chiefs on that side as well. I'd also had understood that the process in terms of traffic complaints or questions hadn't really changed. That, the counselors, I think council was provided with a list of who the proper contact people were. So I guess just stating that out there, and perhaps Dan and Janice could comment from that perspective. I guess I'm sort of questioning, based on, the commitments that have given to us previously, where the gap still remains. So maybe I'll start with Chief Superintendent Gray this time, since we made Dan go first last time.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So in regards to traffic enforcement during COVID, I won't reiterate what's already been said in regards to priority setting. However, what I can say is that traffic enforcement obviously went down because there were fewer persons out in public. However, statistically, our impaired driving went up 54% from last year. So what that speaks to, what we do know, of course, is that alcohol consumption was up 43% overall. And for the most part, our officers were checking, those that were out and about. So our stats did increase. When it comes to community, again, I'll reiterate that all of our police officers, no matter what they're engaged in, it's a community focus. Certainly COVID-19 was our priority. Our school and community resources were, as we would say, assigned to the watch to support the watch and first response. But also in retrospect, I think that because we didn't have any infections whatsoever in the policing community within the RCMP, I think we made the right choice to bolster our membership and to spread them out in regards to their response. But also, part of our responsibility is risk assessment. And when we did receive complaints or comments regarding traffic issues, we would address them as and when. So I think our members did an excellent job in maintaining their connections through the community and the best of their ability under the circumstances with COVID. And rest assured, our school and community resources are addressing the engagement pieces to the best of their ability. We just still do have community members on, but still, until we can assess the next potential upsurge of COVID cases, they'll remain on the watch, but they're still doing their community duties.
Thank you, Chief. Excuse me. Over to you, Chief Kinsella.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to the commissioners. I've mentioned in the past and informed the board that due to COVID impacts, we've had to redeploy some of our members. Chief Superintendent Gray summed up just about all the reasons. And one of the things that was consistent through that was officers' ability and availability to either do traffic or CRO related duties. And communication was put out to all the counselors on April 23rd to that effect, advising who to contact and how to make that happen. I've had a lot of conversation with community groups and particularly our business in our business areas. And one of the things that they expressed was, yeah, they could get an officer, but they couldn't get the same officer. And that simply is true. We did our very best, but having spread the officers out across the watches, as Janice has mentioned, was there for officer safety and then ultimately for public safety. We needed to keep our members safe through COVID, and we believe that we did that very effectively. We have now looked at a transition plan, now moving some of the specialty units back. Some have already returned to their positions. A number are returning on July 27th. Traffic, some CROs, SLOs in preparation of the school year. We're continually monitoring the impact on our members. We're continually monitoring the impacts on the community. So one thing I can tell you is that we issued over 200 summary offense tickets in relation to COVID infractions. Each one of those is not, not easily done. There's evidence that has to be gathered. There's notes that have to be made, preparation for potential court. defense, and I'm sure a lot of those will be coming up in the court system. So we certainly have been busy. We certainly have been enforcing the laws, and to the point that was already made, you know, through the early parts of COVID, when everything was shut down, there wasn't a lot of traffic and there wasn't a lot of need for that. However, our members are still out there 24/7. Our impaired charges are up as well. We've also had a number of stunting charges being laid. So those things are being done. Is it consistent from the same officers? No, and I understand that's a service that people have really come to like, and it's a good service. So we are headed back, and we're doing a transition back to having those members available. Won't be everybody right out of the get-go, but they will be transitioning as we go along. I'll also just remind everyone we're still in a state of emergency, and that has not been lifted yet, and we have to pay attention, and we've been working very closely with public health to ensure the safety of our members, mitigate any potential effects from COVID, and obviously keeping in mind, I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but we have to be cognizant of the reality of a second wave, and what do we do when that hits, how hard does it hit, those kind of things. So happy to provide any information that the board is looking for, and we will continue to do what we can do. There will be a transition, as I mentioned, back to specialty units on the 27th. Traffic, CROs, SLOs, and a number of members have already returned, and then we'll transition as we go along. Obviously paying attention to the environment and adjusting to get us up and running back to as close to as where we used to be based on all of our budget considerations.
Thank you, Chief. Any additional questions or comments? I see Tony has requested to close on this one. Just if there's any other comments or questions that members have, please indicate in the chat. Lindell?
Yeah, I thought it'd be faster to just raise my hand because my computer is slow. So, Chief, when it comes to the slow streets implementation that HRM is doing, do you know if HRP has been enforcing or has issued tickets related to the slow streets and some of the areas that have local traffic only signs?
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Commissioner, for the question. I'm not aware specifically of any issuing of summary offense tickets in regards to the slow streets and potential speed violations in those areas. I'm happy to look at it. I don't have the slow street list in front of me, but I could check that out for you and see whether we've done any enforcement in that area. You know, I think you know Inspector Boone is someone that you can reach out to if you have any issues for your area, and certainly we can follow up on that. Or if you send me the locations directly, I'll follow up and get an answer for you.
Yeah, so really for me, thank you, Chief. That's and, you know, in Boone or Inspector, or is it Inspector? Gosh, my brain's not working great today. Is it Inspector?
It's Inspector Boone, yes.
All right, yeah, okay, great. So I know Inspector Boone is anytime I need something, he's there to help. I think just for the commission, it might be good for us. Even I wouldn't even say the commission, maybe even the council as well, just to know if there's any enforcement happening, because I have no idea. I know I get complaints here and there. I might send a couple streets, but I just in general was wondering if there was any. If you were aware of any enforcement happening. So yeah, Eddie, if you give an update, that's good enough for me, and we'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, I'm just looking in the chat here. All right. Yeah, okay. Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to be clear, Chief Kinsella, I was in no way suggesting there was no enforcement of our laws. And hopefully you understand that was not what I was suggesting. I know that our officers are doing the work, and especially we have to make sure they're safe during COVID-19, make sure they're safe always, but particularly during COVID-19. It's just that understanding, you know, a lot of discussion even today in this meeting, you know, we're talking about our relationship with our communities, and particularly some of our most vulnerable communities with the police department and those citizens. The CROs are the people that have those relationships, and when things are happening, the CROs are where citizens are comfortable in talking to. we have had our share of violent crime the last few weekends also. And, you know, that's concerning. And the CROs play a role in that. And I've heard from the many group homes, the business improvement districts. I've heard from our library now that they're up and running. You know, where's our community response officers? We need those officers out there because very often they get involved before it goes to that next level. So I hope, I'm glad to hear about July 27th, Chief. I look forward to those CROs coming back, as many as possible. Hope to see them back in Dartmouth North and East Dartmouth also. They're critical for those communities, and I'm sure other communities also. When it comes to not enforcing, you know, the feeling of the community is that speed is not being enforced, and that's just frustrating. So I do appreciate the work that our officers do during these tough times, but these are the concerns that our citizens are telling on a daily basis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion put forward by Tony, and we did have a seconder. I don't recall who the seconder was. Was Lisa Blackburn. Thank you, Lisa, for that reminder. I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion? I'm seeing, okay. Any opposed? Any abstainers? Motion passed. Thank you. Now I'm just cautious or concerned about time. We are scheduled until, sorry, I'm getting lots of feedback. I don't know if everyone's muted. Just cautious of time. We are scheduled to go to 3:30. We have a number of items still to go on the agenda. Just wondering if we want to reprioritize, defer some items. Are people able to stay? What is the consensus there? Maybe use the.
Sure, Madam Chair, I can stay another 15 or 20 minutes past our time, but that's just me. So if others have places to go, people to see, and things to do, I will defer to them.
Maybe just a show of hands, who's not able to continue, because we have to be concerned about consensus, or sorry, quorum.
I can continue.
Who is not able to stay? Janice is not. Lisa's only got about 15 minutes. Lindell has until 4 o'clock. Carlos?
I have until about 3:45.
Carlos has still about 3:45. Tony Mancini?
Sorry, it's slow. My next meeting is at 4 o'clock, so I have to be done before then.
Okay, so what I would suggest is that I can give a quick update on 10.2.9, and then I would recommend that we defer Commissioner Blackburn's motion on 10.2.8 and go in and defer the commissioner updates and go in camera.
I'd like to hear from those two commissioners, their thoughts on those items being deferred.
Yeah, and that's why I paused to allow them to weigh in. Lisa?
If I don't have a problem deferring this until the next meeting, that's fine in the interest of time.
Great. And Lindell, your motion, I just had to clarify the process on that. Before we can debate the motion about getting an independent legal opinion, we do require the staff report, and that work is underway. So nothing for us to really vote on from a motion perspective. We get the staff report. Once we have that, we do come back and vote on the motion about whether we go forward with independent legal counsel.
So for clarification, why do we need the staff report first?
Marty?
Because, can you hear me?
Yep.
Because any motion that's brought forward by, the rules say any motion that's brought forward by a member of council or a member of the board in this case, right, requires a staff report and a recommendation before it can be voted on. So it's deemed deferred until such time.
So when we got the independent opinion on the legality of street checks, I don't believe we asked for a staff report. That went directly to the Human Rights Commission, and then they provided support. Now I could be wrong, but I'm sure that's how it worked before.
Yeah, what happened with, oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Marty.
Sorry, no, Natalie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we had the discussion on, when it came to the legal opinion on street checks, whether that request would come from the board or whether it would come from the Human Rights Commission. And to avoid the delay associated with the staff report and the process, the decision was made that the request would come from the Human Rights Commission. And they also had the funding to be able to do that. So that wasn't a motion from the board. We had asked the Human Rights Commission to do that on our behalf.
And Lindell.
Okay. Yeah.
And you'll remember that it was the Human Rights Commission that framed the request for the legal opinion, right? They framed the terms of reference and they sent it out and they engaged the people for it, right?
Right. But there was a motion at the commission. That's where the confusion happens on, because I remember Steve Craig putting forward that motion at a meeting. So then the other piece that I have is the staff report would, what would the staff report outline? Because this hasn't passed, we haven't had a discussion, so I don't know what the staff report. So is the staff report outlining whether or not we should do that or not? Because then that kind of goes against the purpose of what I'm asking for. Is the staff report really just saying this is how we can move forward with it? So I just need clarification on that. And if if that can be answered, I'll let this be deferred till next meeting.
Well, I guess it's so you don't prejudge the situation. It would point out all the considerations that you would want to look at, right? And then you make your decision whether you want to go that way or not, right? But for example, it might talk about the relationship between council and the board, right? In the terms of and relation between the board carrying out the civil governance on behalf of council, all those sorts of things. And so you've got, all it does is really inform the board of all the factors that are at play, and then the board makes its own decision, right?
Okay, so yeah, maybe this, yeah, I think we want to get forward. We want to move forward to our other items. So maybe this is a further offline discussion. I want to deal with this today, but I honestly want us to move forward with the other discussion that we need to have as well. So I will take one for the team and let this be deferred until next meeting, but I want to make sure that we have a discussion offline for sure.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, it's not simply deferred to next meeting, it's deferred until it's deemed deferred until you get the report, right? Which hopefully would be next meeting, okay?
Okay. Okay.
So Lindell, why don't you and I and Marty have a conversation offline about it, and then we'll make sure that that you're comfortable in terms of what the next steps will be, and then we can bring that back.
All right.
Okay, so we'll just make a note of that as business arising out of today's meeting. So what I would propose then is we do defer the remainder of the items with the consent of the commissioners involved. Thank you, Lisa and Lindell, and that we do defer the commissioner updates and move to the in-camera session. If everyone's okay with that, what I'll ask you to do, you will have to exit this invite and join the other invite for the in-camera portion of the meeting. Okay? Great, so we'll see you all in the other teams meeting in, I guess I need a motion to go in camera.
I'll move to go in camera.
Great, and a seconder.
Second, I think I'm
Lindell, yeah. And I think everybody's gone, so with the permission of Mr. Ward, I think that's accepted. We'll go ahead into camera.
We'll call it a quorum.
Thanks, Marty. Has everybody returned to the meeting? Robin, are you there?
Yep, sorry. I have Commissioner Blackburn, Commissioner McDougall, and yourself. That is it so far. So I am waiting on oh no, I also have Commissioner Smith, and we're waiting on Carlos. Commissioner Beals.
What's the quorum? Because I know he said he had to leave as well.
So do we have quorum with the 4 of us?
We do have quorum with the 4 of you, and
Okay.
Commissioner Beals is back in the meeting.
Okay,
Hey.
so are we back live?
We are.
Okay, so at this point in time, we're back in public session. The board has concluded the in-camera discussion. So at this point in time, the board proposes to ratify the motion adopted in camera to defer decision on the item until a future meeting of the board. All those in
Need someone to move it. Need someone to move the ratification and someone to second it.
right, so I need someone to move that ratification.
I'll move it. This is Carlos.
Carlos, thank you. I need a seconder.
I will second.
Seconded by Lisa Blackburn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 That's 3.
Any opposed?
Here, Nate Smith.
One opposed, so the motion to ratify is carried. One last item before we close the meeting. Just need a review the in-camera minutes from the last meeting. If someone could make a motion.
I'll move it.
Moved by Lisa Blackburn that the motion, the minutes from the in-camera session at the last meeting, July 9th, be approved. Seconder.
Seconded.
Seconded by Carlos Beals. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion is carried. So the minutes are approved. So we'll need a motion to adjourn. So made by Carol. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you.